The envelope was in my hands and I couldn't open it. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the return address, a hospital in Lancaster, the white paper trembling because my hands were shaking that hard. My husband was out in the barn, the children were at school, the wood stove was crackling in the corner, and inside that envelope was a number I already knew was going to be too big. But that wasn't what scared me most. What scared me most was that I had no way to pay it. Not because we didn't have the money, we did. It was sitting in a bank account in town that I had never once in 14 years of marriage been allowed to touch. Before I tell you what happened next, I'm Martha, and this is Hannah the Amish Girl, the channel where women like me share the truths we were never permitted to speak in the community. If you value hearing what Amish life actually looks like from the inside, please subscribe and tap that like button. And if you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. In the comments, tell me, did you know Amish wives often have no access to money at all? Let me back up and explain how I got to that kitchen table holding that envelope. I grew up Old Order Amish in a small district outside of Lancaster County. I was raised the way every girl in my community was raised. You learn to cook by 8, sew by 10, manage a household by 14. By 16, you are attending the Sunday singings. By 18, most girls are courting. I married Eli when I was 19. He was 22, the second son of a respected farming family. Quiet, hardworking, kind in his own reserved way. Our wedding was held in late November after the corn was in. 300 people filled my parents' farmhouse and barn, and the bishop preached for nearly 2 hours about the godly household, about the husband as head, about the wife who yields. I remember sitting on that hard wooden bench in my new blue wedding dress, my hands folded in my lap, thinking, I am ready. I can keep a house. I can raise children. I can serve God beside this man. What I was not ready for, what nobody had prepared me for, was the financial structure of an Amish marriage. Here is what people outside the community do not understand. In Old Order Amish life, the husband is not simply the spiritual head of the household. He is the financial head in a way that is total and absolute. The bank account is in his name. The checks are signed by him. The bills come addressed to him. The income from the farm, from his side work, from anything either of us touches, flows into one account that he alone controls. This is not unusual. This is the norm. In my district, I did not know a single married woman who had her own bank account. Not one, not my mother, not my sisters, not my aunts, not my friends. The system has a name in our world, though no one says it out loud. It is called household stewardship, and the theology behind it is built on 3 pillars. First, the husband is accountable before God for the family. Therefore, he must control the resources. Second, a wife who handles money independently is showing hochmut, pride, the worst sin in our community. Third, money is a worldly concern, and the less a woman touches it, the more she remains pure in her domestic calling. That is the official version. The real version is simpler. Money is power, and power belongs to the man. For the first 10 years of our marriage, this did not feel like a problem. Eli was a decent man. He gave me what he called household money every Monday morning, a small stack of bills set on the kitchen counter for groceries, for fabric, for the things the children needed. If I needed more, I asked. If he said yes, I had it. If he said no, I did not. I made peace with it the way every Amish wife makes peace with it. I told myself it was God's order. I told myself my mother had lived this way. I told myself this was what submission looked like. And then I got sick. It started in the spring. I was 33. I had 4 children, the youngest still in diapers. I was canning strawberries one afternoon when I felt a pain in my side so sharp I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. I told myself it was a pulled muscle. I told myself I had been lifting too much. I drank peppermint tea and I prayed and I went back to work the next morning because in our community you do not stop. You endure. Suffering is faithfulness. Pain is something to be offered up. For 3 months I worked through it. I made the meals, I tended the garden, I nursed the baby. I sat through the 4-hour Sunday services on those hard benches, even when the pain made me bite the inside of my cheek until it bled. I told no one, not even Eli, especially not Eli, because asking for help with my body meant admitting weakness, and admitting weakness meant being a burden, and being a burden was the one thing an Amish wife is taught never to be. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. By August, I could not stand up straight. By September, I was running a fever every night. By October, I finally told Eli that something was wrong. He looked at me across the supper table, his face tight with concern, and he said the words every Amish husband says in that moment. We will see what the community can do first. The community in our world means the network of folk healers, midwives, and bone setters that handle most medical care among the Amish. Doctors are expensive. Hospitals are worldly. Insurance does not exist for us in the conventional sense. Most Amish do not carry health insurance because we do not believe in it. Instead, the church has a mutual aid system where families contribute to a common fund that pays for major medical expenses. But here is what they do not tell you. That fund is administered by the men of the church, the bishop, the deacons, a few elder farmers. To access it, your husband applies on your behalf. He explains your case. He requests the money. And if the men decide the request is reasonable, the fund pays. If they decide it is not, you go without. I went to a folk healer first. She pressed her hands on my abdomen and gave me bitter teas, and told me to fast and pray. I went to a midwife who said it might be a cyst. I went to a chiropractor in the next district who said my back was out of alignment. I drank the teas, I fasted, I prayed, and I got worse. By December, I was waking up at 3 a.m. soaked in sweat with pain that made me cry into my pillow so the children would not hear. Eli finally agreed I should see an English doctor. He drove me in the buggy to the bus stop, and the bus took me into Lancaster. I sat in the doctor's office in my plain dress and prayer cap, and a kind woman in a white coat ran tests and looked at scans, and then sat down across from me and said the word that changed everything. Tumor. Operable, she said. Likely benign. But it had to come out. And it had to come out soon. The cost of the surgery was $19,000. I rode the bus home with that number burning a hole in my chest. $19,000? We had it. The farm had been good for years. Eli was careful with money. There was more than that in the account. But the account was not mine. The decision was not mine. And when I walked into the kitchen that night and told Eli what the doctor had said and what the surgery would cost, he sat down at the table and was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I will speak with the bishop. That was the moment I understood something I had spent 14 years not letting myself understand. My body was not mine. My health was not mine. The decision about whether I would live or die or suffer was not mine. It belonged to my husband, and through him to the church, and through the church to the men of the community who would gather in a room I would never enter and decide my fate. The bishop came to our house 3 days later. He sat in our front room drinking coffee my hands had brewed, eating the pie my hands had baked, and he and Eli talked for 2 hours about my body as if I were not in the kitchen listening. He asked about the doctor. He asked about the diagnosis. He asked whether we had tried all the community remedies. He asked whether perhaps a season of more prayer might be considered before resorting to such a worldly expense. I stood at the sink with my back to them, washing the same dish over and over, while 2 men decided whether the tumor in my body was worth $19,000. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. The bishop left without giving an answer. He said he would speak with the deacons. He said he would pray on it. He said the fund had other obligations and a request like this required careful discernment. That night I sat at the kitchen table after the children were asleep and I cried into my apron. Not the quiet crying I had done for months, the other kind. The kind that comes up from somewhere deep and old, the kind that tastes like rage. Because I understood then what I had not let myself understand before. If the men decided no, I had no other option. I could not write a check. I could not transfer money. I could not call the hospital and arrange payment myself. I had no signature authority over a single dollar of the money my own labor had helped earn. 14 years of cooking and canning and mending and bearing children and running a household and tending the garden, and I could not pay for the surgery that would save my life without the permission of a room full of men I barely knew. My friend Rebecca had gone through something similar 2 years before. She had a complication after her 6th child. Internal bleeding the midwife could not stop. By the time her husband applied to the fund and the bishop deliberated and the deacons agreed, 3 weeks had passed, and she nearly died on the way to the hospital. I sat with her in her kitchen a few months later, and she whispered something to me over coffee that I have never forgotten. She said, "Martha, the worst part was not the bleeding. The worst part was lying in that bed knowing my life was being decided by men who had never once asked me how I felt." We sat in that kitchen, 2 Amish women in plain dresses, and we did not say anything else. We did not have to. Both of us knew, both of us had always known. We had just never said it out loud. The bishop came back a week later with the answer. The fund would cover $12,000. The rest would come from us, from the household account Eli controlled. Eli agreed without consulting me. Why would he? The decision was his to make. I had the surgery in February. It went well. The tumor was benign. The recovery took 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, while I lay in bed unable to lift my own children, unable to cook, unable to do the work that defined my worth in our community, I had a great deal of time to think. I thought about the envelope on the kitchen table. I thought about the bishop drinking my coffee while deciding my fate. I thought about Rebecca nearly dying because 3 men in a back room moved too slowly. I thought about my mother, who had lived this same life and died at 64 of a heart condition that had gone undiagnosed because she never wanted to be a burden. And somewhere in those 6 weeks of lying in bed staring at the ceiling, something inside me cracked open and could not be closed again. I left 2 years later. I will not go into all of it here, but the leaving cost me everything I had built. My parents stopped speaking to me. My siblings returned my letters unopened. My church declared me under the ban, the formal shunning that means I am dead to the community I was raised in. Eli kept the children at first, though I have since rebuilt a relationship with the older 2. I lost my home, my faith community, the only world I had ever known. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. But I gained something I had never had before: a bank account in my own name, a signature on my own checks, a medical decision that belonged to me alone. The first time I walked into a bank in town and opened an account by myself, no husband, no bishop, no men deliberating in a back room, I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward and wept for an hour. Not because I was sad, because I was 37 years old and it was the first time in my life I had ever held a piece of paper that said I had the right to decide what to do with my own money. In therapy, I learned the words for what I had lived through: financial coercion, economic abuse, coverture, an old legal doctrine that treated wives as property of their husbands, abolished in the English world more than a century ago but alive and well in the community I came from. I learned that what I had been taught was God's order was in fact a system, and systems can be questioned, and questioning is not pride. I learned that a woman who controls her own money is not committing a sin. She is exercising a basic human dignity that should never have been taken from her in the first place. If you grew up in a world where the men decided whether your body was worth saving, I see you. If you ever stood at a kitchen sink, washing the same dish over and over while 2 men in your front room discussed your medical care without asking you a single question, I see you. If you ever held a hospital envelope in shaking hands and realized the money to pay it was not yours to spend, I see you. The Amish world gave me beautiful things. A community that showed up for every birth and every funeral. A faith that has been rebuilt but never forgotten. A work ethic that has carried me through every hard year since I left. But it also gave me 14 years of being told that my submission was holy when it was actually just dangerous. There is no scripture that requires a wife to wait 3 weeks for permission while a tumor grows inside her. There is no theology that consecrates a woman's helplessness as faithfulness. There is no God I believe in now who designed a woman's mind and body and intended for her to be locked out of the decisions that govern her own survival. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments what part stayed with you. Tell me your story if you are ready. And if you want to keep hearing the truths from behind the prayer cap, subscribe to Hannah the Amish Girl. There is still so much I have not said. If you want to go deeper, the full Amish Insider Guide is in the description. Until next time, your money is your power, and your power is your life. Choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.